A brand new 4th Congressional District. This district generally runs north of the Temple and west, the north part of the valley, down around through Pahrump. For those of you who are not in the district, though, this should be still a very interesting debate. Both candidates, because this is a new district, are brand new. There is no incumbent. The winner goes to Washington, D.C. for at least 2 years. The loser takes home some valuable prizes, which we will have afterwards. From the Democrat side, we have State Senator Steve Horsford. And from the Republican side, Danny Tarkanian. To give everybody an idea on the rules, each candidate will be given 5 minutes to speak. Then they will take questions and be given 1 minute to answer the questions. And then a 2-minute closing statement. All questions are on issues. We will not have any personal attacks. I will not tolerate any bullying, any protest. This is a house of God. Let's keep it respectful. Okay? I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 2. Who goes first? Steve, you're up.
Good morning.
Timekeeper's over there, by the way.
First, I want to thank all of you for turning out today. I'm Stephen Horsford, and I'm running for Congress in the new 4th Congressional District. I am honored to be here. I'd like to thank the Temple and the Men's Club for hosting. I also want to recognize all of the leaders in the community who turned out for today's debate. But before I start, I know there was some sad news shared this morning. Senator Arlen Specter passed away. And he has been a champion, regardless of party, for what it really means to be a statesman. And someone who did what we needed to do to move our country forward, who worked on both sides of the aisle, and who made things happen. So I'd like to give just a moment to Senator Specter. Thank you. I also want to let you know that this election is not about me. And it's really not even about my opponent. It's about all of you. It's about what kind of community we want and who is most qualified to help us get us there. You know, I was born and raised in this district. This is the district where my wife Sonia and I raised our 3 kids. It's the district where I've served as a state senator for 8 years. It's the district where I work as the head of the Culinary Academy, providing thousands of jobs for people. And what I see happening hurts. The level of unemployment, the housing crisis, the parents and the grandparents who are concerned about their security with Medicare and Social Security. These things are of great concern. And as I've traveled throughout this district, and this is a big district geographically, people talk to me about the same thing. They want to know, what are you going to do to help them get a job? They want to know, what are you going to do to help address the housing crisis? They want to know whether you're going to preserve and protect Medicare and Social Security. And they want to know what you're going to do to help small businesses grow. Those are the things that I've worked on as a state senator and in my private life as the head of the Culinary Academy. I don't just talk about job creation, it's what I've done. And these are the priorities that I am running for now for Congress. I also want to say that I had a very unique opportunity to take a trip to Israel several years ago. It was a formal delegation trip with the National Conference of State Legislators. I was one of 9 members of the legislature selected from across the country. I met with members from the Prime Minister's office, from the Israeli Department of Defense. We literally went out on the border between northern Jerusalem, overlooking Jordan across the way, and I learned some very specific things during that trip. It was life-changing for me personally, but what it showed me most of all is that Israel is our strongest ally, and the United States must always work to preserve our funding for Israel and work to establish a two-state solution for peace. And that's something that I believe in fundamentally, and that I would work very hard as a member of Congress to accomplish. So, as you hear from my opponent and I today, I want you to understand that there are differences between the two of us. He's a good person, he's a good family man, he's made contributions to this community that I don't discount. But when it comes to our record, when it comes to getting things done that need to get done, when it comes to experience of actually working across party lines, passing budgets, funding education, preserving funding for aging services and Medicaid, I've done it. I've done it, I have the experience, and it's why I'm running for Congress. Thank you for being here this morning, and I look forward to the discussion and the debate.
Well, I'm asking you to vote for me for Congress. I'm having a hard time turning the microphone. That's not a good start. First of all, I want to thank the Temple of Sinai and Howard for putting this event together, but mostly for all of you to come out here and spend your Sunday morning listening to us. I'm very humbled and appreciative that you're willing to do so. I'll tell you a little bit about my background first. My family and I, we spent most of our adult life living here in Southern Nevada. My family and I moved here in 1974. I went to high school here, went to college here, and I've come back and I've started my different businesses here. I got married 11 years ago to my wife, Amy, who's here with me today. If you'd stand, please. You need to be the mic. And I have 4 young children. My oldest is 9 years old, named after my mother, Lois. And I have twins, Ava and Ashley, that are 7, and a 2.5-year-old little boy named Jerry, that was named after my father. We care very deeply about this community, as I'm sure all of you that are sitting in this room, and certainly my opponent. Now, with respect to my business background, I've been a small business owner 3 different times in my life. First as an attorney, I practiced law, and I had a small business for about 3.5, 4 years. I also started a nonprofit sports academy where we work with young kids and we try to teach them the life skills that you learn through playing sports. Not just the fundamentals of playing sports, but the things that you learn as you get older to utilize in your profession or your collegiate career, educational career. And I think that's very important. I think it's very important that young kids learn these traits. And I also have a real estate company that I've started 4 years ago or 5 years ago now, right in the middle of the downturn. So it's been very difficult, but we've survived. We have a good project that we've done, and we're working very hard with it. Now, my philosophy of government is very simple. I believe very strongly that we need to have a strong and effective federal government, but it should be a limited federal government, limited by what's specifically spelled out in our United States Constitution. And then whatever the federal government's not doing, there are certain things the state government should be doing based upon the state constitution. And then whatever the state's not doing, the local jurisdictions pick up the slack. One of the big problems I see is the overlapping of the different types of governments. We all want to have an effective government, but we need to know what our duties and responsibilities are. My father, who was a basketball coach, used to make the statement. He wanted his teams to do 1 or 2 things and do them great, and he'd love to play against a team that tried to do 5 or 6 things, because they can't do any of them very well. Well, that's the problem I see with the federal government. Instead of concentrating on the areas it should concentrate on doing those things great, it's trying to solve all of society's social ills and economic ills, and they can't do any of them very well. There's a clear distinction between my opponent and myself, and I don't think it's a negative. It's just a difference in political ideology. I believe, again, that we need to have a limited, effective government. We need to provide all the resources necessary to do things great. I believe very strongly in the free enterprise society, the capitalistic society that has made our economy the greatest in the history of the world. I believe if you unleash the entrepreneurial spirit of the American worker and get government off their backs and out of their wallets, you're going to see this economy turn around. My opponent believes very strongly that the government needs to get more involved in our lives, whether it's through more taxation, more regulation, or just more oversight. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think if you look through society and you see which governments have worked or which haven't, governments all around the world are going away from that philosophy and going towards our philosophy. And here we are the most prosperous nation, the most generous nation in the whole world, and we're going the way other countries that left. This election is going to be pivotal in our country's history. You guys in this room and many others, primarily here in Nevada, because Nevada is going to have such an important say on who's the president, who's the senator, who controls the Senate and Congress. You're going to have a big impact on which direction we're going to go. I hope you consider what I've said today and that you would consider support me and voting for me on November 6th. And again, thank you so much for coming out here.
Okay, we're going to start asking the questions. For those of you who gave me questions, thank you very much. I'm going to phrase them in a way that both candidates can answer your questions. The first one, we'll make this the first one the softball. Your position on the state of Israel. Danny, you can go first this time.
Oh, obviously, I'm very, very supportive of the state of Israel, our strongest and most loyal ally in the Middle East. We need to do everything we can to support Israel in the defense and protection of their sovereignty, and I will be a strong vote in that regards.
Thank you. As I said earlier, I've learned a lot about the important role that Israel plays in the region, in the Middle East, and how vital it is that we have a very clear and consistent policy of the United States support for Israel. And that starts with support for foreign aid. It continues with a strong and consistent position to oppose every effort for Iran to get nuclear weapons. And it continues with building partnerships that go beyond what we have today. When I was in Israel, I had an opportunity to meet with the Israeli Chamber of Commerce, and we talked about the unique opportunity to develop business opportunities between the United States and Israel. Israel is known for its great technology, its research and development, and those are things that we need here in the United States and that we should be partnering on much greater levels. And so when I talk about economic development and diversification in Nevada, I have Israel in mind. I have the opportunities that would come from renewable energy. One of the renewable energy companies, BrightSource, is an Israeli-based company that is building a renewable energy project right here in the state of Nevada. So those are the real opportunities that we have, but we have to have a clear and consistent policy. And our support for Israel must never be questioned, it must never be doubted, it must be resolute.
Scott, it's 1 minute on the questions. Oh, it is? Okay. The next question on everybody's mind, I'll shorten the question to Obamacare. Your positions on Obamacare, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, whether you would repeal it or not, what you would keep on it. Steve, you can go first this time.
I'll be brief. A minute is a hard time to... Affordable Care Act, I support it. My opponent wants to repeal it. I support it for 3 reasons. Number one, if you have a pre-existing condition, if you have diabetes, if you have cancer, if you have hypertension, the insurance companies can never deny you now for insurance. Number two, if you're a woman, you cannot be discriminated in your health care, and you have access to screenings, including for mammograms. And for young people, they can now stay on their parents' insurance until they're 26. So that if they're ill or if they're sick, if they have an accident like I did when I was in college, that will not cause you to become medically bankrupt because you can't afford your bills. There are provisions of the bill, though, I believe that we have to work to implement right. And one of those that concerns me is the block granting of Medicaid to the states. As the chairman of the Finance Committee, I understand how that impacts us. Susan Rhodes, who is a member of our Vision Stakeholder Committee and is an expert in social work and healthcare, has talked about this, and this is something that I would work to improve if elected to Congress.
And thank you. This is an area my opponent and I disagree with. I do think there are some good provisions and provisions that we need to implement in the new health care bill that's going to be passed. We certainly want to provide health care to as many individuals who want to have it, buy it here in our country, and the ones that can't, make it available to them. We certainly want to provide insurance to people with pre-existing conditions, and there's a few others. But when you balance the positives to the negatives of this bill, it's not even close. I'm going to give you, we don't have enough time to go through all the negatives, but I'll give you 4 of them. First is, it's a job-killing bill. The imposition of a $2,000 tax on small businesses are going to create jobs. Second of all, it's a tax increase on the middle class. $800 a year if you don't buy insurance. The middle class people, people in our state here can't pay their home mortgages, let alone their insurance. We need to do that. Third, it guts Medicare by $716 billion. It creates 15 unelected bureaucrats to do it. Finally, according to the Wall Street Journal, it will result in 800,000 less doctors than what we need now, and it will create 16,000 IRS agents. Anytime you have more IRS agents and less doctors, there's got to be a problem with that bill.
All right, we're getting questions on Social Security and Medicare. We're going to split them up. The first one on Social Security, how would you fix the Social Security program? Leave Medicare out, just deal with the Social Security first.
Well, there's a couple of things that we need to do. First and foremost, we obviously need to raise the age for qualification of Social Security, having the buffer zones for the ones that are getting closer to Social Security right now. When Social Security was passed in the 1930s, the life expectancy rate was 19 years less than it is now, but we've only got up 2 years before they start taking benefits. So that obviously is going to cause a deficiency in the amount of money that's in there. Second of all, as we've talked about in the past, I believe we need to preserve and protect Medicare for any of the seniors that are close, any of the people getting close to collecting that amount. But I'm a big states' rights believer, an individual freedom believer. I believe very strongly us as individuals know what's best for us and how we should invest our hard-earned money. And I think the younger people should be able to have the opportunity to take their money that they're investing and use it in a private retirement plan. I would much rather invest my money than have the government who has shown a complete failure of being able to do so otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a clear distinction between me and my opponent. He does want to privatize Social Security. He said that he would believes that he has a better ability to save the money than government does, and he would like to turn it over to Wall Street. Now, for those of us who have seen what has happened to our housing values because of Wall Street, what would have happened had my opponent and people like him had their way and had put Social Security on the highs and lows of Wall Street? What would have happened? And let's talk about what Social Security is. This is a replacement of income program for people who pay into it over a lifetime. It's a promise. And my opponent wants to break that promise to individuals who desperately need it. And for what? To give more tax breaks to the top 2% and to provide corporate subsidies to big oil and big banks.
Part two of that question is Medicare. Medicare is much deeper in debt, potential debt than Social Security. So again, leaving Social Security aside, what do we do as far as Medicare, as far as the Medicare Part D and everything that goes along with it?
I will support and preserve Medicare, period. My opponent and those he supports or support him want to turn it into a voucher program. He has said that he supports the Ryan budget, that it was a good place to start. The Ryan budget turns Medicare into a voucher program. And what is a voucher? A voucher says, here's a set amount of money for you to go out and meet your healthcare needs, and if the costs go up, you're on your own. Well, I don't believe that we should allow our parents and grandparents to be out on their own. My grandmother lived in a nursing home for 27 years of her life after having a stroke and was paralyzed. If it wasn't for Medicaid and her disability, she wouldn't have been able to live that long. I will not break my promise to any senior, any parent, or any grandparent who depends on Medicare for their quality of life in their later years.
Unfortunately, my opponent is continuing down the same failed path he did at every debate we've had and mischaracterizing my statements. Only having a minute to respond, you can't respond to all of the statements he makes. So let's concentrate on Medicare. First of all, he has already broken his promise on Medicare by supporting Obamacare. He has agreed to gut $716 billion out of Medicare right now, including what's going to wipe out Medicare Advantage, which 30% of all seniors here in Nevada have. He's going to gut it completely. He wants 15 unelected bureaucrats to make the determination how you're going to spend your Medicare Medicare money, what kind of services are going to be provided. I, on the other hand, have made a pledge, signed a pledge, that I will not cut benefits at all for any seniors that are currently on Medicare. But we need to find another approach to preserve and protect Medicare. Paul Ryan's plan is not just a voucher plan, it's an option. You have an option to stay in Medicare or going into a voucher program. You have the option to have insurance that congressmen and senators have or stay in Medicare. Isn't that a great way to get started?
Okay. Our next question, Archie, stand up if you would please. Archie? Archie was our men's club president for 4 years, helped build the club up to its present state. We are all very grateful to him. And Archie's question is, what are your opinions on organized labor and unions?
I feel very strong we should have organized labor and unions, but it should be a balancing act between what's fair and reasonable. There are a lot of labor disputes that are going on out there. My mother is a very strong union supporter, and I agree a lot with her positions. But there's got to be a balancing act between how these disputes are being handled. They need to be handled in a professional and a civil way and not a violent way. And I've heard that it happens on both sides of the approach, whether it's the union side or the employer side. We just need to have a fair, balanced approach to discuss very important issues on how the contracts for hardworking Americans are taken care of.
Let me go back to the last question because I really need to respond to my opponent. He said I mischaracterized his position.
Steve, I want to keep it on the questions. Let's deal with the union first. We'll get back to it. You've got a closing statement.
I'm a member of a union. I believe in the right for individuals to organize. I run the Culinary Academy of Las Vegas, which is actually a joint labor management partnership between 26 of the largest employers here in Las Vegas and the Culinary and Bartenders Union. I believe that people have a right to fair wages, to good health care, to pensions, and the ability to move in the middle class, move up in the middle class. And that's why I support the role of unions and am appreciative to have their support. Now, my opponent talks about his mother's record, but he really needs to talk about his own. He's run now for 4 times. He's been rejected every time. And in 2010, he ran to the right of Sharon Angle for the U.S. Senate. And now he wants to talk about how he believes that we can work together to get things done. How can you do that when you take extreme, rigid positions?
Let's stay on the questions. Next one. Here it comes. My show, my rules. Jobs. I'll take the booze. Let's keep the applause for the candidates. Your position on creating jobs. I think you're up first.
Thank you. I think when you measure someone on what they say they're going to do in job creation, you should look at what they've already done to create jobs. I've worked for 11 years helping people create jobs. People walk through our doors every week who are unemployed, who do not have the skills and the training. They get enrolled, they take the classes, they graduate, and they go on to get a good paying job that provides livable wages for themselves and their family. In the state Senate, I've worked with Governor Sandoval and members from the other side to come up with a new economic development strategy for the state of Nevada. The first time this was ever done. Susan Rhodes was a member of our Vision Stakeholder Committee that helped build this plan. This isn't something that we created as legislators, this was something from the community. And there are things that we can do to grow our economy, but it has to start with education and making sure that our generation of children are equipped for the 21st century.
Again, my opponent mischaracterized facts again. I haven't lost 4 races. This is my 4th race. I'm beating him badly in this race, so that's why he has to mischaracterize every statement I make. It's unfortunate.
Right, let's
my opponent has a record in Carson City. He's raised taxes on small businesses, doubled the business license fee, he increased the taxes on payroll, he's increased the taxes on car registration fees. As a result, the unemployment rate has doubled since he's been in the state, since he's been the majority leader in the state Senate. I clearly have a plan. You haven't heard my opponent give you any plans to increase jobs. That is, cut regulations to make them reasonable and fair across the board. Cost-benefit analysis between what the benefit of those regulations are to the cost you're going to have in them. Second of all, we need certainty within for businesses, certainty in regulations, certainty in the tax code, certainty in the healthcare. Until we do, we're not going to get any economic development. And third most, we need to get a fair and simpler tax system so everybody is paying their fair share. You do that, you're going to see the entrepreneurial spirit of this country take off and create real jobs.
This one may take a couple of questions, so we'll start it off with Danny. Specifically on the Simpson-Bowles plan. For those of you who don't know, there was a bipartisan commission that Congress had, Simpson and Bowles, to help balance the budget. And they came up with a combination of reduction in taxes, increase in taxes, and reduction in spending. A little bit of both. So if both of you can get into detail on the Simpson-Bowles plan and what you favor and what you oppose.
I personally agree very strongly we need an increase in revenue and a decrease in spending. But the increase in revenue isn't by raising taxes on individuals and businesses, because all you're going to see is a decrease in the revenue. You increase revenue by creating more economic development, economic ability here in our country. You create more jobs. More people working, more businesses prospering, you're going to create more revenue. Second of all, we have to cut back spending. Spending is out of control. Under the current administration, the debt has increased by $5 trillion. We will be in the same fate of Greece and other countries if we don't get our government spending under control, and we need to start cutting those programs. If we have more time, I can get into some of that we'd like to discuss.
I'll have more questions.
I support Simpson-Bowles as an approach to balancing the federal budget, but let me talk about actually having to do this at the state level. I worked to reduce state spending by $600 million this last legislative session. This is the first time that the state budget was reduced over the biennium in decades. My opponent talks about the revenues that we extended in order to fund education. He's right. We increased the business license fee from $100 to $200. We actually eliminated the payroll tax on businesses with payroll under $250,000 a year. And these are the type of balanced approaches that we should have in order to move Nevada from being 50th in education to somewhere that's more respectable. Now, at the federal level, we have to begin to address our federal deficit. I've done it, my opponent hasn't. I support the need to allow taxes for those at the highest income to sunset back to Clinton-era rates so that we can responsibly balance our budget.
All right, next question. Here comes a goodie. Afghanistan. Your position on our troops in Afghanistan.
First and foremost, our troops and our men and women in the armed services deserve our support on the front lines and when they come home. I am glad that under the President's leadership we ended the war in Iraq, and I am glad that with the support of the National Security Alliance that we are beginning the troop decreases in Afghanistan. But let's be clear, we have to make sure that we protect the United States and our interests around the world. And I will continue to do that because I believe in a strong military. There are 3 military bases in Congressional District 4. My father-in-law is a retired member of the Air Force, and I believe that we have to support our men and women on the battle lines and when they come home.
With respect to Afghanistan, I think the position was very clear, and it's unfortunate it hasn't been followed, and quite frankly, well, mostly by the current president. But when the 2001 attacks occurred, we had a duty as a nation to go after and find the perpetrators, search them down, either kill them or bring them to justice. Then once we did, we should have got out of the countries and allowed the countries to handle their own internal affairs. We are losing proud and heroic military men every single day while we stay in Afghanistan. Over 2,000 have been killed now in Afghanistan. Our country's going broke because of the amount of money we're spending there. We've already killed the perpetrator, and according to our president, we've dismantled the terrorists. Well, let's get out of the country, let's put the money back into the United States where it belongs.
All right, let's move to the country next to Afghanistan, Iran. Right now, the United States is imposing sanctions on Iran. Do you support this approach? Do you think it's working? Do you want to do something more, like a military strike?
Yeah, I certainly support the approach of imposing as stringent sanctions as we possibly can, and we certainly hope that it's working. But from what we see, it doesn't look like it's doing a real good job. The closer Iran gets to a nuclear bomb, the more in danger not only the United States are, but our ally Israel, that we cannot allow that to happen. I support providing Israel with whatever support they need, absent putting troops on the ground, but provide them with whatever support they need to protect themselves against Iran from having a nuclear bomb.
A nuclear Iran is a threat to the world, not just to the people of Israel. This is something that we don't need to just place on the burden of Israel. This is something that we need to do because it's the right thing to do for the safety of the world. I support strong economic sanctions against Iran, and I believe that we have to have every tool at our disposal to ensure that they do not get nuclear weapon capability.
All right, we'll move foreign policy back to local economics. Specifically, taxes, tax rates, federal taxes, Social Security taxes. Do you favor lowering them, raising them to balance the budget, or leaving them alone?
I believe that we need to do things that support the middle class. The middle class are the drivers of our economy. They are the consumers of product. They're the ones that help to create the demand so that our economy can grow. And so I support the approach whereby we can allow tax rates for those top 2% of the income earners to sunset back to the 1993 Clinton era rates. Also to begin eliminating or reducing a lot of the corporate subsidies. I call it corporate welfare that's given to big oil companies and big banks. They don't need our money when they have billions of dollars on their balance sheets, and they're doing nothing to help the middle class or small businesses have the access to capital to grow their businesses, to buy new homes, to buy new cars. And so I believe that we need to have an approach whereby the middle class gets the tax breaks, not more tax breaks for the wealthy.
And I certainly agree with that, but his direction and how he goes is completely wrong. Raising the tax rates for the wealthy, whether it's 36% to 39%, is not going to increase the amount of taxes Warren Buffett is paying or Mitt Romney is paying. We have a tax code of 73,000 pages that are littered with special deductions and special credits for people that have the best accountants and the best lobbying companies. From the day I've been in this campaign, I've talked about we need to get rid of those deductions. We got to get back to a fairer and simpler tax code where everybody's playing under the same rules. Well, the wealthy do not have those tax breaks, but everybody has the same tax breaks. That is how you will raise more revenue, and that's how you have a fairer and simpler tax code. It's the right approach.
A question, do you believe access to higher education in this country is a right?
No, I do not. I believe that our country should be able to provide the ability and the options and to get into college if you're able to do so. But I do not believe that we can impose another right on our government to pay for those costs when we have a debt of $16 trillion already and a deficit of $1.1 trillion. I do agree with the President's plan where we should lower the interest rates for college loans. Right now, the interest rates have dropped. So we're giving the banks at 3.5% to 4%, or now 0 to 1/4. The students, and quite frankly, all of us here should be able to benefit from those lower interest rates, but to impose another mandate after the healthcare mandate and all the other mandates that we have is going to bankrupt our country, and nobody will be having an education if that happens.
Reasonable people can disagree. But I do not understand how we do not view a quality education for every person as something that is in the common good of all of us. You know, I'm a man of faith, and I believe that when you support the least of these, you support us all. And when we talk about education being a right, that sounds to me like what Governor Romney said when he says it's a luxury. So if you can afford it, then you can have it. If you can borrow money from your parents, then you can go to college. If you're not part of the quote-unquote 47% that he refers to, then you'll be okay. That is not the America that I know and that I believe in. I believe in an America that provides great opportunities for all people, that access for education at every level, from K-12 to colleges to our state universities, is something that we should all work to provide for, and I will do just that.
Apparently, one of our questionnaires has been getting too many flyers and too many signs this campaign season. And she wants to know what you can do in Congress to improve our green way of life.
This is something that I've worked on. Nevada, look, we have a great opportunity. We do not have oil, but what we do have in Nevada is an abundance of solar, wind, and geothermal. This is our energy source that can make us the net exporter of renewable energy for the country. This is a unique opportunity. It's what I've done. I sponsored legislation in Nevada that requires that more than 25% of our energy resources come from renewable resources such as solar, wind, and geothermal. It's good for three reasons. Number one, it creates jobs. Number two, it reduces energy costs. And number three, it's the right thing to do for our next generation of children that deserve to inherit an earth that is clean for the next generation.
I agree that as our country, we need to move towards green energy. We need to continue the research and development of that product, and then get to there at some point in time. However, this is another area my opponent and I disagree with, and quite frankly, his first two reasons show why we should do it. First of all, the mandate that Nevada Energy purchase 25% of green energy, which costs 4 to 8 times as much as regular energy, has increased all of your power bills here. People who can't pay the mortgage, people who can't put food on their table, are paying 4 to 8 times as much in their energy costs because of these green energies. Secondly, what kind of jobs are you creating? The 6 jobs that were created in Henderson for the solar plant that was $700 million. I mean, heck, I think a lot of people would like a $100 million job if that's what it takes to get it created. That's not the answer. There is a time for green energy. We need to keep working at it. Research development, not forced upon us during the greatest economic crisis in our generation.
Can I respond, please?
I'll give you both time.
Well, first of all, he said things I want to respond to every single question, and I diligently followed your rules.
I'll give you both on this another minute. Go ahead.
Well, it's a clear difference, and it's just simply wrong for him to mislead the voters and say that it's because of renewable energy that your costs are increasing. That is simply not the case. We created 3,500 jobs because of renewable energy in the state of Nevada. You talk about 6 jobs. Where are the rest of the jobs, Mr. Tarkanian? They're here. They're jobs that were created. IBEW, they're building renewable energy plants across the state. These were tradesmen and women who were unemployed, but because of our focus on creating renewable energy projects, some of which were supported by former Governor Gibbons and Governor Sandoval, we're developing Nevada's renewable energy infrastructure. Maybe my opponent doesn't understand that, but we are.
Okay, clearly my opponent wants to spend all the taxpayer dollars to create whatever projects he wants, thinking there's going to be a benefit. He's misleading you when he talks about the jobs that were created. I have no idea where that number comes from, but let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's accurate. The only way those numbers could have come from is the construction of those projects. I talked about 6 permanent jobs that were created by the solar plant in Henderson or Boulder City. That's what you have. You have hundreds of millions of dollars that he is taking from you as taxpayers and saying, give this to private companies, many of which have failed, billions of dollars in losses, and we get very little benefit in jobs, but worse than that, the energy, and he failed to address this. The energy costs 4 to 8 times as much as the regular energy. Do you feel that is the right approach during the greatest economic crisis in our country's history at this time?
All right.
Switching topics a little bit. One of you is going to win the congressional vote. One of you is going to Washington, D.C. Either Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat, or John Boehner, a Republican, is going to assign you to committees to sit on in the House of Representatives. If you had your choice, which would be the top 3 committees that you would ask for? Let's just say the top 1, and why you would want to sit on a particular congressional committee.
Banking and finance by far. I believe the problems that we have through this economic crisis was caused through the Banking and Finance Committee. I'm a finance major through college. I understand what's happening through the Dodd-Frank bill and why that's hurting economic growth right now. And quite frankly, I just read in the paper today how finally people are talking about getting back to the Glass-Steagall Act, which was a real cause of the financial crisis. When we eliminated the distinction between having one company own a bank, an investment company, an insurance company. We need to get back to the Glass-Steagall Act, separate those companies, then you won't have financial institutions that are too big to fail. All the Dodd-Frank bill did was create more too big to fail companies and force them to lend out less money, and that's why our economy is not expanding right now.
Well, I'd be pretty afraid if he got onto the Financial Services Committee, because he said in 2010 that if he were on the committee, he would have...
Steve, I'm asking which committee you would sit on. Tell me which committee you would sit on in the House.
I would be interested in serving on committees which will help the constituents of Congressional District 4, transportation and infrastructure, because there's an opportunity to build an interstate highway between Las Vegas and Phoenix, which will help create jobs, grow our economy, put our contractors back to work, but it will also help to address our infrastructure needs at the same time while diversifying the economy. Now, I have to say this because it's a clear distinction between me and my opponent. He said that he would have refused to have regulatory reform of Wall Street, would have
Absolutely not.
Both of you knock it off.
Those are his own words.
Okay. Next question here, and we may need more than 1 minute time, but we'll go in 1 minute increments. What are the 3 specific proposals you would support in Congress to improve the economy? You're up first. 3 specific proposals.
Well, I just talked about one, the Interstate 11 highway project between here, Las Vegas and Phoenix. It is in our strategy for economic development for the state of Nevada. It's supported by the Chambers of Commerce and the resort community. Number 2 is going to be providing more research funding for our universities. Nevada does not get its fair share of federal dollars back to our state. And this is something that would build up both UNLV and UNR. And number 3, unlike my opponent, I will not abolish the Department of Education and ensure that we fund schools, Title I programs, Pell Grant programs, and funding for early childhood education.
The first 3 things I'm going to do are going to help create jobs here in our economy, here in the state and nationally. First and foremost, you get rid of Obamacare, which is crushing jobs, going to take away jobs all over the place because employers can't afford it. Second of all, you got to get back to a fair and simpler tax system where everybody's paying the fair share. There's some certainty within the businesses on how that is imposed. And as I mentioned, we need to get the liquidity back to the financial institutions. Reaffirming the Glass-Steagall Act and get rid of the Dodd-Frank bill will create more liquidity. I'm glad I got enough time to address another misrepresentation of my opponent about the Department of Education. Well, I have stated repeatedly that I want to keep the important aspects of the Department of Education, such as Head Start, financial aid, and some of the Title I provisions for disability children. We should utilize the rest of that money to come back to the state of Nevada and allow you, the people here closest to your children, to best determine how that money is spent and what curriculum is going to be used on it.
Our next question is a very sensitive one, so bear with me and let's show respect. Your positions on, let's put it this way, abortion, the morning after pill, having to do with women's reproductive choices.
I am a man of faith. I was raised as a Catholic, and I believe through my faith that life starts at conception. And if life starts at conception, you have to do what you can to preserve life. I also understand, and I've got good friends on the other side that believe very strongly that that's not the case. I respect their decision on how they feel, and I would expect them to respect my decision on how I feel. And I certainly don't think we can do anything to prevent the morning after pill from moving forward. I won't do anything to do so. Thank you.
I support women's right with their doctor to choose what they do with their bodies. I, as a husband and as a father of a daughter, cannot tell them what is in their best interest. They have to decide that for themselves. And I think this is something that is very important because this is about getting government out of our lives. You talk about reducing government's role in regulatory oversight of everything, but yet you want to impose it on women. And in the last 2 years, there have been more bills proposed and debated in the House of Representatives led by the Republicans on issues affecting women than bills promoting job creation.
We're now going to go and give each candidate 2 minutes to finish up. Before we do that, I would just like to let everybody here know how grateful I am for both candidates to come here this morning. Months ago, yes, they both deserve a big round of applause. But even more so, months ago I started inviting candidates to be here this morning to debate. These gentlemen were the only two who would come and do a debate format rather than just a candidates forum. And I am very grateful to both of them, and I respect both of them, and they deserve our applause. Thank you both. So now, Steve, you opened up with the 5 minutes, so I'm going to let Danny start with the 2-minute closing.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you all coming here today and taking your Sunday morning to listen to us during this very crucial time in our country's history. And as I hope that you got throughout this hour or so debate that we've had, there are clear distinctions between my opponent and I. Not some of the ones that he wants to try to create with some of his statements, but there are certainly clear distinctions. And we're in a pivotal time in our country, and you're going to have to determine, and you got more of a say than virtually anybody else around the country, on what direction we're going to go in this country. Are we going to go back to what I believe has made our country the greatest country in the history of society? A limited government doing what it's supposed to do and doing them great. Personal freedoms and liberties. Creating opportunities for people to go out and live their life's dreams. And then personal responsibility when those things don't take effect. Or are we going to go to the direction the country's currently going now, where you see an expansion in all of the government programs, regulations, healthcare, taxing. Which direction are we going to go? I ask you to think about that very carefully. If you believe in what I believe in, I ask for your vote on November 6th. Again, thank you very much, and thank you, Stephen, for coming here today.
Thank you. Because we didn't have too much of an opportunity to go back and forth, you only heard our positions and not so much the contrast. One thing I do want to clear up is this issue of passing a balanced budget. I would love for my opponent to tell you and others what he would have done if he were in the state legislature and faced with the worst economic downturn that our state had ever had. Would he have allowed the funding for the Holocaust to be cut as the governor had proposed, or would he have found an alternative to restore that funding? Would he have allowed family services, under Jewish family services, to be cut from funding for aging? Or will he have done what I did, which was to restore funds so that those vital services to our community were restored? There is a difference. And the difference is clear because it's about fighting for you. It's about getting things done that need to get done. I get it. I get it that our number one priority has to be jobs, job creation, and growing our economy. It's what I've done. I get it that we need to focus on increasing our home values for those who are responsibly paying their mortgages and helping those who are so underwater not have to be penalized twice. And I get it that our parents and our grandparents are so worried that now there are these proposals that would change Medicare in Social Security. And I will work every day focused on these three things if you elect me as your representative to Congress. It's about you. It's not about me. Thank you very much for being here today.
Okay, now we have the most important part of the morning. We have the raffle. We collected $150. Danny, stick around. Stick around. The winner gets $75. We're going to ask Danny to pull the ticket and Steve to announce the number. Now, I don't want to influence anybody, but last month's winner donated his winnings to the Jewish Federation. And it's a great ticket. And the winner is
806-485.
806-485. Do we have a winner in the house? Yes, over here, Archie. Okay, remember 7 o'clock tonight at Hampton Hall. You have Avraham Berg, Joe Klein, Dennis Breaker. Next month we have APAC coming. Thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.